Hi there, Robin Andrews here from Comp Academy, and this is a video that occurred to me to make after teaching a student yesterday who had a few particular issues that I think are quite common, and I want to clarify them. So the context was we were solving a kata from Code Wars, and if you don't know about Code Wars, I recommend getting familiar with it. I've got a video that I made recently on that you can check out if you like. But the basic idea is we needed a function that would take as input a string, and it would swap uppercase for lowercase and lowercase for uppercase letters. So let's just show you what I mean by that. So let's say we have our string, let's put it my string, and set it equal to, I don't know, Henry. Okay. So by the time we've done the function, we want it to end up looking like Henry with the letters swapped uppercase and lowercase. Now we can actually use a thing called assert to test this, which you may not be familiar with. So we can assert that the name of the function swap, I'm just going to call it swap, it's not the best name in the world for a function, but it will do for now. Swap my string, right, should come out as, it should be equal to lowercase and then the rest uppercase. Okay, so this is a way we can do some very, very basic testing, is rather than printing stuff out and making sure it prints what we think it should, we can actually use the assert statement. Very useful. I'm not going to get into testing too much here, but it's just a really useful thing to know about. Okay. So then we need to actually write this function. So we've got a function called swap. So we have def, still in caps lock, def, and it takes a string. Now, it can be really confusing if we use the same argument name as an actual global variable. But for now, I'm just going to ignore that problem and just go with it. It's fine. If that confuses you that they are actually different things, then use a different name. So my string. And then just to start off, we do pass, so we don't get an error. And then this is like a basic introduction to test-driven development, really, because in theory, this should fail, which is the first part of the cycle. I fail my tests, I fix them, and then I pass them. So let's see how that comes out. F5. Okay, so I've got an assertion error because calling swap with my string does not equal what I said it should. Okay, so that's quite a useful way of testing the function. So what happened with the student? So he had real trouble flowing between the concept and the code. Now, there's a lot of preparation done for coding in GCSE, computer science, and elsewhere, where you do algorithmic thinking that eventually manifests in being able to write some kind of pseudocode or program statements. Okay, I think a really good approach to it personally is to use comments. You can actually dive right in, but write a comment before the thing you're going to write. So we talked about what the process would be of changing, the case of each character in a string. And took a while to get there, but we came up with find all the uppercase and swap to lowercase, and then we had the opposite as well. Now, it turned out that this word find was more complex than we had initially imagined, because you say find to another human being, they're like, I'll go and look for it. Okay? They don't necessarily need instructions about how they're going to find. But it turns out that find on its own was actually quite a dense concept that we needed to unpack a bit more. And we had to think about, are we going to use iteration, we're going to use selection, we're going to use sequence. Iteration, okay, repetition, we're going through a list, so or a string in this case, we're going through the characters in a string. So iteration turned out was our tool of choice for this, which meant some kind of loop. Okay, so second thing was, what did we say? So go through, I think we said go through, okay, which is a clear sign that some kind of loop is involved. T-H-I-N, go through the string, or you could say the characters of the string. For the characters of the string, and then you'd have some kind of selection involved. So, so that's going to be if. Okay, so if it's upper, then make it lower. If it's lower, then make it upper. So at this point, there's no actual code going on. We're just thinking purely in terms of the algorithm itself. And this is the thing that my students struggle with, is that they kept moving from the conceptual level, which is like the algorithm, to the code, and every time they were in one, they completely forgot about the other. So what do I mean by that? So let's just throw in a few useful words that you might need, useful functions. So we've got lower, we've got upper, and we've got is upper, not is super, is upper, and what is lower. Okay. So this is, so you don't need to know about coding at this point because I've given you some of the functions you're going to use, so you can just think about the algorithm. So what you might want to do is go away and implement this algorithm yourself, and come back and watch my solution. That would be a good thing to do if you wanted to learn the most. But otherwise, just carry on. So yeah, if on line 4 here, if current character, okay, not current string, current character is uppercase, swap that one, and then that's obviously going to be the corollary of that. How you say that word? Okay, so now these comments are starting to look a bit like pseudocode, or at least an algorithm expressed in structured English. Okay, so we can now think about the details of the code because we've got the concept sorted. Now the concept took a while to kind of unpack into this version, and this still isn't all the details we need. If we want to be a bit more detailed, we can also say initialize result to, and this is a really common pattern actually in a lot of code wars and a lot of the kind of algorithms you'll get in your exams if you're doing GCSE and A-level. You have like an initial value which can be an empty string or a 0 or an empty list, and then you iterate through a list or a string and you modify, and then you append the modified version to the result. If that doesn't make sense, all will become clear. So that means at the end of our function, we're going to have to do return. Okay, so if you don't know about functions, then don't follow this. Go and look at some other videos first, because you need to know the basics of functions. So we've got initialize results, so we can do that straight away. So result is the empty string, okay, and then we're going to loop through the string, the characters in the string, and we're going to modify based on what we find, right? So at the end, we're going to return result. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere. But again, this flow between concept and code. So we've got the concept, so now we can think about the code. But while we're doing the code, don't lose sight of the concept, okay? Because it's really easy to do. So be clear, you know, each line of code, you kind of need to simultaneously have like, okay, I'm writing this code because I want it to achieve this, okay? And the way to achieve that is by writing this code. So they're kind of both loaded into your mental RAM at the same time, okay? So go through the character of the string. Well, that's for I in range len my string. And that's, if you don't know how to do that, then watch my previous videos on iteration, because that's a really common constraint. You're going to need it again and again. Missing bracket. Okay, so that means I can accept a variable length string. Okay, it can be short, it can be long, and we'll always go to the end of it because we're going to the length in our range. So this is setting up the iteration, okay? Then what we're going to do is actually have, if you look at the code here on line 12, the comment, I've got this name here, current character, okay, this entity, which is the current character. So I'm actually going to assign that to its own variable, just for convenience, so we don't have to keep checking, so we don't have to keep doing that. Hopefully that makes sense. So we're going to do current, just call it current, could call it current char if you want to be really clear. I'm all in favor of clear variable names. So that equals my string at this position, I, okay, which changes each time through the loop. So it starts off as 0, so that means it's going to start off as capital H in this example, and then it goes to lowercase e, okay, that's how we iterate or loop through the string. So we've now got our current character. Let's tidy things up a bit. So then we can get into our selection, okay, so we've looked at the iteration, now we're looking at the selection. So if and this actually needs to be indented now within the loop. So again, coming back to the concept, right? This is happening each time we go through the loop. Oops, what did I want to do? I need to move it forward. Okay. However, the returning wants to happen outside of the loop because you don't want to return every time, otherwise you'll just return the first result and that'll be the end of the function. Right, so if current char is equal to double equals, in fact I don't want double equals, I want to use these methods that I mentioned here. So we say in our comment, we've got the concept nicely laid out in our comment. So we're saying if it's uppercase, so we say is upper, right? Then, okay, now this took quite a while with my student. We don't want to set result to this. We could do this, right? We do result equals current char dot lower, okay? And in fact, I'll carry on with this so that you can maybe pick up on my mistake as we go along, and we'll go back and fix it at the end. So that kind of looks okay, but bear in mind there's probably something fishy with it, right? And then we can do else, or elif actually, current char. In fact, I don't want space, I want dot is upper there. Same for this one, current char dot is lower, right? Then results equals current char dot upper. Okay, so I'm switching it to upper. And there is actually a third case that you actually need to handle in your selection. So else result equals what? Okay, so this is where the problem will show itself. Okay, so if it's a space, what are you going to assign it to? What you're actually going to assign it to is current char. Okay, so what's going on? If we run this, we're going to get an assertion error, probably, unless there's any other errors first. Yeah, an assertion error. So it didn't work. Let's see what actually came back. So get rid of some of this empty space. So instead of assert, I'm going to copy this line, paste it back, and this time I'm just going to print the result. Okay, so you should always think of function calls as meaning the result of calling the function with this argument. So print the result of calling swap with my string. Okay, and actually, of course, I don't want to print whether it's equal to that. I just want to print its value there on line 24. So let's see what that does. So it prints the last character. Now, has it swapped it? Yeah, so it's in the right case, you see. So what's going on? We've only got one letter in our result. Now, the reason for that is because each time we modified result, so result started as an empty string, right? And then we just overwrote its current value, which is not what we want the algorithm to do. What we want to do is have the empty string, and then we append or concatenate technically, so that's like adding a letter, the swapped or flipped version of the first character, and then the swapped version of the second character, etc., etc. It needs to be concatenated, added to the existing result. Otherwise, you overwrite the result, and you just end up with one character at the end, which is not what you want. So we have to do result equals result. Okay, so here we maintain the original. So again, easy to get lost. Okay, concept. The concept is we're concatenating. We're adding to a list. We're not overwriting it. And then in terms of code, what we're doing is we're saying take the old one is equal to the result plus the new character. Otherwise, we'll throw away the old one. Hopefully that makes sense. We do the same here. Result equals result plus the new character, and the same here. Result equals result plus current character. Now that may work. Hopefully it does. Let's see. Okay, so we didn't get an assertion error. So that's why these assertions are really useful, because nothing happens if they're correct. So you can just assume everything's fine. In this case, I've done both. I've also printed the result, but you don't have to do it. It's quite useful to see the output as well. So there is a lot there, depending on your level of experience with Python and programming in general. This might have been like a crazy crash course into lots of strange esoteric knowledge that you hope to be that you hope to have access to, or it may have been just a simple reminder of some concepts. But like I say, the reason I made this video is just be aware of where you're at. Are you at the concept level? Okay, while you move to the code, while you're doing the code level, don't lose sight of the concept level. Okay, and you keep having this flow between those two, and that really was what inspired this video. Okay, so thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.